Alright, hello and welcome to another Marvel Snap video. Today I'm going to be doing the OTA wish list video. These are buffs that I want to see happen, not necessarily buffs I think will happen. So if you enjoy this video, let me know. This is my first time doing a video like this. But also if you like any of the changes that I see, comment letting me know and share it around. Second Dinner does listen to community feedback, so the more word you spread on a change that you think is a good idea, the more likely it is for you to see that change in the game. So I have 6 changes that I want to see. 6 changes. And these are all going to be pretty significant changes. Obviously, I'm no developer. I don't know how the implementation of these could affect the metagame. I'm someone that plays the game a lot, so I have an idea of how the impact of this would be. But some of them, I may have missed something that it's like, no, this is completely broken, you can't do that. So if that's also the case, let me know, because, I'd at least like to see these cards played a little more than we're seeing them now. So that's why I'm kind of swinging heavily with them. I will say, for this first one, though, I wanted to take a trip into the history of Marvel Snap. And I wanted to... Okay, what the hell? I wanted to look at Mantis. More specifically, I wanted to look at the patch note history here. Because, if you remember, Mantis and Cable both got a bunch of changes early last year. So, the changes that happened is Mantis got her text changed in March of last year to what her current text is. Okay, Amber, don't jump on my keyboard and ruin my video. Where it changes to, instead of drawing a card from your deck, it copies the card that they just played. The idea with the change was if you hit a scaling card, something like Venom or Sage, you would get the card after the on reveal, so you would have a better version of their card. The application is it was fucking shit, and Mantis doesn't see any play. March of last year. The reason I bring that up is Zemo released in April, and her old text would have been perfect in Mill. So, why have they not just reverted it? Just put her back to this, where you just draw a card. Mill is not good. The idea of Mill is that your opponent doesn't get to play cards anymore. It's not like it's good. How many times have you had your entire deck milled and you still win the game? I don't know why they're afraid of this. Why they haven't done it. I just don't get it. And maybe I'm passionate about this because I really like Mill and I wish that it was better. But this just seems like such an easy change that they have had in front of them for literally 9 months and just haven't done. I struggle to see how this change would negatively impact the meta. If their thought is we don't want a Mill to be an oppressive deck, in my head, this isn't a Sandman-esque change that's going to make it miserable. It's going to make Mill a little better, but still just kind of bad, if I'm being completely honest. I don't see how it would be great. It would just be better. It'd be playable constantly, maybe. I don't know. This is the first change I want to see, and I really hope I see it, because this is probably the most obvious and easy one to see, in my opinion. Alright, so the second card I want to see is Pixie. Get changed. And I will say, I'm starting with the more tame ones. So this is the last really tame one, and the next 4 are going to be pretty spicy ones. But Pixie, this card frustrates me. Anyone that watches my channel regularly, I just made a Pixie deck, and you could see how I felt about that game. But this card is supposed to have a Mr. Negative-esque ability, correct? It's supposed to make it so your deck is super... When you have Pixie, you just should win. That's what Mr. Negative is, right? When you play Mr. Negative on 3 or 4, you should pretty much win the game every single time, right? Like, that's just how it works. Pixie is supposed to be the same way. The problem is this word right here where it says shuffle. Because shuffle in Marvel Snap means do nothing at all. I don't know how many times I've experienced a Korg shuffle a rock right on top of my deck. I get it. That's how shuffling can work. But for a card that's supposed to be a win condition staple and supposed to completely, like, right, it's supposed to make you win the game, it shouldn't be that random. My suggestion to change it is simply make the on reveal instead swap the base costs. So it still has that random element, right? You don't know where the costs are going, but it ensures that if you have one 6-drop in your deck, and it's still in your deck when you play Pixie, it cannot get its own power or its own cost back. It has to swap a cost somewhere else. So if you have multiple 3-drops in your deck, sure, the 3s can get swapped with other 3s. That's fine. That makes sense. But if you have only one of one cost, you should never get it back. Like, it's infuriating when it happens. Could you imagine if Mr. Negative's text was shuffle the powers and costs in your deck, and he just did nothing? Like, it was just like, we might switch him. We might switch the Iron Man, but you might also still pull a 5-0 Iron Man. Like, no one would play negative. Like, that's what Pixie is. It's, we might do what the text says, but also we might not. Like, I think if you just change that to a swap, so that way you know that the costs are getting moved, and you can snap, you can actually get equity more freely with the card, right? You can snap knowing that you can Pixie on 2, knowing that, hey, my big cards will more likely get cost reduced. It's still going to be a very volatile deck, still a very gambly deck, but I think it would at least be more playable and certainly be more fun, right? Like, Pixie is supposed to be a very fun card, and instead it's, like, infuriating, because most of the time she just doesn't do what she's supposed to do. Also coming from someone that is one of the unluckiest Marvel Snap players. So, take that one with a grain of salt, I suppose. Okay, so this one is a bit of a spicier change. Enchantress. Enchantress has seen a lot of changes, specifically looking at her power, because her effect is, while very strong, the fact that it's a symmetrical effect makes it very polarizing. It can be good if you want to remove your own ongoing text in a deck like Shuri, Red Skull, like those kind of decks where you want to remove those bad ongoing texts. However, in other decks where you don't necessarily want to do that, it can be tricky to maneuver your Enchantress in a way that you aren't removing the texts that are valuable to you. So because of that, they have moved around her power a lot. And the main reason with that is she is an expensive card. A 4/6 is expensive, right? She is supposed to be like the ongoing equivalent of Shang. Basically just deleting an ongoing card from the board. Sure, their stats stay there, but most ongoing cards, most of their power comes from the ongoing effect. So it's effectively Shanging the card. So because of that, she has a lot to live up to. What I think would be a very interesting way to buff her, which you might need to take away a point of power or two to make this happen, I'm not exactly sure. But instead of remove ongoing abilities, I would like to see it just read remove the text of all cards here. And you might think, well, that doesn't do a whole lot. You're right. But I think if you let Enchantress hit activated cards, like the cards that have activate abilities, I think that could be the difference maker in her being a very good card. Right? We have exactly one card that can interact with just text. And, oh yeah, it's the third or fourth most popular card in the entire game in Red Guardian. I'm not saying Enchantress would become that, but I'm saying I feel like that with, like I said, a power reduction to complement that very strong text she would be gaining, I think would be a very interesting way to make Enchantress a more interesting card to play. And it would also be interesting to see, right, because Red Guardian he's a 3/3 that hits a text card and then inflicts negative power. So it'd be interesting to see if it's the text removal from Red Guardian that really makes him strong, or if it's the negative or the combination of the two. Whereas if Enchantress just gets removed text, how good would she be? I think it would make her significantly stronger, and I think it would make her more playable. I really don't see Enchantress very often. Probably like the least used tech card in the game. So giving her a little bit of extra utility, I think, could help her out a lot. Alright, so looking at Scream. I'm not going to say I think Scream is bad, but I would like to see a change to the move control kind of archetype as a whole. In my opinion, I think it's a little weird that Kingpin's a 1/2, Craven's a 2/3, and Scream is a 2/3. Like, those are the three main power scalers, right? I know Kingpin reduces power of opponent cards, but right, they scale based off how you move your opponent's cards. What I would like to see is I would like to see Scream changed to a like 3/4 or something in that realm. So that way you can have more of a flow of Kingpin into Craven into Scream, and then on 4 start going crazy, right? I think that would be very interesting. And to compensate for Scream getting that cost boost, I would like to see the once per turn portion of her text removed. Right? I don't know how that would work, really, because if you think about it, there are 2 cards in the game that can move more than 1 card per turn. It's Juggernaut and Magneto. I believe are the only 2 cards that can do it. So that means you have 2 turns where that matters, and the only other time that that text would become relevant is if you're playing a move deck, which, guess what? Scream should shut down every move deck. Like, if Luke Cage is allowed to shut down an entire archetype, Scream should be allowed to shut down an entire archetype. Like, that makes sense to me, especially if you move her to be the same cost and close to the same power as Luke Cage, which does the same thing. I think moving her to that, where she can just be a monster scaler that can win you a lane, and then you have to figure out how to win the second one, I think it would be a very interesting change. I don't know where the power would need to be. Maybe just moving her to a 3/3 or a 3/2 or something with that text would be really strong, but I think you probably need a cost reduction or a cost increase to justify the text change, almost assuredly. But I just think it's weird that you can only do it once per turn, especially because there aren't many cards that allow you to move more than 1 card per turn. Like, I think that would make move control a lot more fun and a lot more viable than it is. I understand it's viable now, but I feel like it is so situational and so niche, and it still will get shut down from things like Shadow King, Shang, and Luke Cage. Like, there's still a lot of tech into it, right? Like, if you're thinking, oh, this card's going to be a monster, right? Everyone thought the same thing about Dagger when she got her change, and she was really strong for like a week, and then people were like, oh yeah, Shadow King exists, and then she wasn't. So I think if move control ever gets out of hand, there's so many tools in the toolbox to deal with a card like Scream that, like, you know, let her be crazy in those games. Because it's going to be such a niche case where you get her to be like a 317 or something, right? And then it's like, oh yeah, she's like a 310 every other time if you're doing everything right. I think it would be interesting to see. And sticking with the moving cards, I would really like to see Craven get a change. They gave him a point of power forever ago to have him match Angela. But what I would be really interested to see, and this would help move control and just move decks in general, is see him go back to a 2/2 and then change it from when a card moves here to just when a card moves, this gains +1 power. So he gains less power, but he gains power so much easier. Like, the biggest issue with Craven is you have to keep his lane open to move cards into it, which a lot of the cards that you use with Craven, they can only move one time. So they get to move into his lane, and then his lane gets cluttered. Whereas Angela has, like, the exact opposite effect, right? It's so easy to buff Angela because it's easy to move cards out of a lane. It's hard to move cards into a lane. So if you instead let Craven become this small scaler that whenever cards move, he gains power, he's going to be basically another Angela. Like, Angela right now is a very tame card. I think Craven, with that text of when a card moves, this gains +1 power, I think he's going to be right in line with Angela. He's going to be a little stronger in move-oriented decks, which makes sense, but he's also going to be decent to pair. He's actually going to be like a viable option to pair in like those Angela Elsa mover decks, where you're going to move like 4 or 5 cards, making him like a 2/6, a 2/7, right? He's going to be a decent stat, which is, you're right, significantly above rate for a 2-drop, but in the right situations. And I don't know, I just think it would be a fun change. I feel like Craven's a underwhelming card. Lastly, the card that everyone just forgets exists, I feel like. This guy right here. I would make a argument here that okay, let me rephrase. These cards at the bottom here, when you're looking at the Giganto, the Agatha up, right? So Orca would fall into this because he's a 16 power card. You have Agatha, which has a super detrimental downside. Obviously, it's a fun card, not meant to be good, but it is a downside if you're looking at it from just a power perspective. Giganto, he's limited to 1 lane he can play. Destroyer destroys all the other cards on the board. I don't know why his text is off the screen. Infinite, you can't play a card last turn. And then Orca. He's only a 6/16 if you play him in a lane by himself. You want to know what I would say? I would say that playing in a lane by itself is more detrimental than Destroyer. And I would also argue it's more detrimental than skipping a card the previous turn. I would much rather skip a card the previous turn than I would only have 1 card in a lane, knowing that I can only ever have 1 card in that lane if I want him to be a big body. At worst, I would say Infinite's downside is just as bad as Orca's. So I want to see Orca change to a 6/10 that gets +10. Make him match Infinite. And you're going to be like, but that's ridiculous. He's going to be a 6/20. He's going to just completely outshadow Infinite. Guess what? Infinite's plus side isn't that you actually play the goddamn card, right? The plus side of Infinite is that you can cheat him in so easily. If you Jubilee Infinite, he's a 6/20. If you have Dracula eat Infinite, Dracula is a 4/20. Like, it's easy to get the power on the board. Orca would have the downside of you cannot cheat him in. If you Jubilee Orca in, he's a 6/10 because he's next to Jubilee. If Dracula eats Orca, he is a 4/11 because he ate 10 power. So he would still have extreme limitations. He might make like ongoing decks more viable because that's the only way you can get power into his lane. But a lot of the times, if you're looking at games, look at how much power wins a lane. 20 power does not very often win a lane. I think this change would bring an uproar to the game for like, I don't know, a week? Because people are like, what the heck is this Orca doing? And then you'll realize how to counter Orca. You'll go, oh, they left a lane open. Let me just make sure I have 20 power there and win the other lane they played power into. Like, it'll be that simple. Or if you're losing priority, you can just know to shang the empty lane to hit the Orca. There will be a lot of counterplay into a 20 power big body Orca. I think it would just be nice to have the card be good. And then, you know, we can see, hey, is 20 power on Orca too much? I don't think so, but I would be interested to see. Like, I think some of these changes would be nice to implement and just have Second Dinner sit there and be like, okay, cool, let's just revert that real quick. Like, if they can do these OTAs whenever they want, like, then they can easily press the undo button and just, like, change the text back real quick and be like, we'll fix it in the next one. No, like, I think some of these would just be nice to see, right? Just see when these, because all of these cards are in interesting spots. Orca, my guy just doesn't get to see any play. Has to be one of the lowest play rate cards in the game. He's supposed to be a big stat stick, and he just doesn't do that very well. All the other big stat sticks do it better. I would like to see some love for my guy. But anyway, I digress. Those were the 6 cards that I would be interested in seeing a change to in Marvel Snap. If you thought any of these were interesting, let me know. If you think that any of these are broken and like too ridiculous, also let me know. If you have any changes that you think would be interesting to see, I'm all ears. But like I said, if you think any of these are interesting, share the video, share the clip, post it on Reddit or whatever. Like, make the information known so that way these changes can happen. Anyway, if you enjoyed, please leave a like, comment, let me know. Subscribe for checkouts, and I'll see you in the next one.